Hi everyone, this is the second video that I'm making for you today, which is Monday and the first day of our week 7. The topic that I want to discuss now, I think, is a very interesting one, and that is the problem of giving and receiving feedback. I was very impressed and interested in our discussion on this on these topics, because there's actually a couple of topics here. I thought everyone was really thoughtful and sensitive and probing and mature in how you treated this. I also thought it was interesting that no one just wrote quick automatic responses, and whether that's because this issue is one that matters to you, or whether it's clear from me that I don't want you to rush things out. I don't really know, and it doesn't really make any difference. But so I wanted to thank everyone for the very high quality work that you did on this discussion on giving and receiving feedback, and for that matter throughout the class. Now, this is a hard topic. Okay, this is a complicated topic because there's a little bit of it that's formality. That is, what is the format for doing this? But the really hard part and the engaging part and the interesting part is not the formatting part at all, but the psychology and the social psychology of how to receive and give feedback. Now, I have the feeling that we're going to discuss this again down the road, especially when we start doing our group projects. But as a way, or by way of introduction, let me say 4 or 5 or 6 things on this. The first thing is a kind of paradoxical, hard, a little bit unpleasant thing to mention. And that is when you think about giving and receiving feedback, there's a bad model to keep in mind, and that is the conventional academic model of writing a paper for a teacher who gives you a grade and maybe a few comments. Okay, and for reasons that I'm going to explain in a little bit of detail, that's not really either the spirit or the matter of how feedback is done professionally. In reality, feedback is much more interesting than just handing something in and getting a grade and getting whatever, a sentence or 2 or 10 sentences if you're lucky. Response, one time for all. Okay, so the good model is the idea of a craftsman working on a project singularly focused on getting it right. And that might take more time than she or he planned for. It might take multiple attempts. It might take ripping the whole thing up and starting again. There's a lot of different possibilities, but the goal is to get it right. And that's the way I think you should approach your professional feedback, both assimilating it and responding and giving it when you have to. Okay. This breaks down into 3 or 4 separate things. That is to say, there's 3 or 4 different things to keep in mind when you're trying to get your feedback right. Okay, the first one is pretty much exactly the opposite of the academic situation in most cases. That is, when you turn in a paper, with rare exception, you get 1 shot. You get 1 attempt, and that's it. And of course, I realize that sometimes there's editing, and there's many different things that can happen. But by and large, it's 1 time, 1 swing, and you're out, sort of thing. It's exactly the opposite in professional communication and professional feedback, both in terms of receiving and getting it. You basically always have a whole bunch of attempts, every once in a while there will be a lot of pressure, or there will be a time limit, or there will be a project deadline, or there will be an especially difficult supervisor where, it's once and out. But everyone, that doesn't really happen very much. The concrete realities of the workplace make that possibility or that option very unlikely. Usually you have a bunch of times. Now, one of the things that many of you said in your comments is you felt stress about either assimilating the feedback or giving the feedback. A lot of that stress comes from having one chance to do it. Well, as I'm saying, in the reality of workplace feedback is you get a bunch of chances. Okay, that's one. The second major point is even more important, I think, and that is, like it or not, in academic writing, there's a sort of adversarial, judgmental relationship between you and your prof. Usually you don't know your profs very well. You most certainly don't know them, how should I say it? You don't know the full range of their personality. You only see them sort of through one lens. In the workplace, it's exactly the opposite. If anything, you work with your coworkers almost too well because you're with them all the time. Okay, so that's part of this. But the other part of it is really important, and that is most of the time your coworkers are on your side. And yeah, of course, sometimes there's competition in the workplace. Sometimes your supervisor might be difficult. Sometimes there might be enormous financial pressure on your organization or your unit. But by and large, and as I look back at my whole work experience, yeah, right. There were some times when I felt menaced by work environment and the people in it, but not very often, really. And most of the time, I was working with people who respected me, cared about me, and were listening to what I said. By the same token, by and large, I was working for supervisors who wanted to see me succeed. And you can imagine why. And that is, if the employee succeeds, the supervisor succeeds. If the employee in professional work fails, well, it's really the supervisor, like it or not, it's the supervisor's fault. And yes, sometimes the supervisor could say, I got stuck with a bad apple, but most of the time, the higher level executives will say you hired the wrong person. Okay, so that's, in almost all cases, they're on your side. Okay, and this relieves, again, the anxiety and the frustration and the weariness. The best tip that I give, my own employees and writing students is if you're not sure of what should be said, what needs to be said, or how to approach something, you just ask. And I think that you only really rarely, once every 2 or 3 years, would a supervisor and employee give me guff about an honest question. That doesn't happen very much because they see it is in their interest to help you. And here, let me sort of close this part of my statement about they're on your side. One of the things that always impressed me about working with large groups of people, and I work for very large organizations with teams of thousands of people, that they really, my employees, my coworkers, not only knew me well, but really cared about me and were interested in sort of my view of things. This made it, quite frankly, fun. The kind of sense that, I have to go into a dreaded job. I did never have that. I've never had that. I always really enjoyed going to work, even though maybe, in my heart of hearts, I would rather be writing or doing professor stuff. Nevertheless, in my time in an office and in a standard workplace, I always had a very good time. No, but put it really simply, and worked overtime, gladly and willingly because I liked it. Okay, now the next thing I wanted to say in my little counting list here, this is the fourth thing. So it's do it right. You get multiple tries. Your coworkers and your supervisors are usually on your side. There's something about supervisors that I need to mention. Now, your supervisor, yes, can be authoritarian, can be difficult, but there's a couple of things that you want to remember about your supervisor, in addition to what I've already said. First of all, a supervisor is not one person. And as you're doing assignments in 210, you want to keep this in mind, because I know this is not perfectly habitual, and most certainly not a habitual way of preparing a college writing assignment. But in professional writing, the supervisors are not really individual people, but there's hierarchies and complexes of supervisors. Supervisors have co-workers at their level, supervisors have supervisors, sometimes multi-supervisors, and your own supervisor is getting input from many people. And as you're writing for her, you want to keep that in mind and be flexible. And as I was saying a second ago, ask questions about what she wants and don't be afraid to ask why. In general, supervisors really want that kind of relationship with their employees. Okay. Let me repeat something I said before. When in doubt with your supervisor, just ask. Okay? And once again, back to no anxiety and feedback. This is another reason not to have anxiety. Because, rather than get tense and, slam your head against the wall and beat your dog or whatever, just ask. Okay? And I'm going to say something more about this in a second. Okay, so the relationship with your supervisor is complicated, and you want to keep that in mind as you're writing the innovation projects. Okay, secondly, but actually this is my 7th point. Your supervisor was 6. The 7th point has to do with your colleagues. Trust your colleagues and work with them. Get feedback from them, ask them their opinion, and usually they can help you a lot. And once again, that relieves the stress. Okay, I want to make a general point to conclude this, and I've got about 2.5 minutes to do it, so the time is good. One of the keys to professional success and one of the keys to professional writing is developing rapport and relationship with people. Okay, I'm going to talk more about this down the road, but you want to really take this seriously. You want to plan for it. You want to think about it. You want to write books about it. You want to ask me about it. But over time, one of the keys to success on your job is to develop really good working relationships with your coworkers. I would say that it takes roughly a year at least to do this rapport building. Sometimes a lot more, if you don't quite mesh with someone, or if your jobs don't align in a convenient or elegant way. It can take longer, but because of that, plan it and realize that yes, I used to do this with my technical people because I'm not really so strong in any aspect of technology. I can make it work for me, but I don't really know how to do it. So I need a lot of help and a lot of patience amongst my technology people, in part because often they don't quite understand where I'm coming from, and it takes them a while to get used to me. So what I would do is plan. I would have like a year-long plan, and this involved like reading their stuff, reading their theses, developing social relationships with them, and many more things like this. This paid off fantastically well because this made the job fun. This took a lot of pressure off me and took a lot of the anxiety and the edge out of working at a difficult, demanding job. Okay, I hope that helps everyone. I'll come back to this, but I'm out of